Yo, what those up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching The Vast of Night. And yep, there's the glare right on cue. Can't have nice things. The Vast of Night is set in the 1950s in a small New Mexican community in which you have a switchboard operator and a radio DJ who start to hear strange things over the airwaves. They soon start to realize that the source of this noise is coming from something hovering above their town. Yep, another alien movie. In case you're new here, I do not like aliens when they're used as movies because it kind of is like the license for a filmmaker and writer to do whatever the hell they want because aliens. It's like the ultimate plot scapegoat, you know? However, I was put onto this review by Chris Stuckman, who's one of the very few film reviewers that I actually pay attention to, and he praised this movie for a couple things that really intrigued me. The first of which being that it didn't sound like the usual alien invasion movie. It's a lot more smaller scale and controlled, where you have a small group of people that are kind of not necessarily in the thick of it and encountering the aliens more so head on, but coming from a safe distance, but able to experience the effects of it nonetheless. It almost sounded like Pontypool, but instead of zombies, you have aliens, and that's an interesting perspective to explore from. You could do a lot of unique things with that. The other thing that intrigued me about this movie was the fact that it was made on a low budget, and being an indie filmmaker myself, and everything I've ever made had zero budget whatsoever, it's always inspired for me to see what other filmmakers are doing and how they're able to stretch their dollar. You know, I more so walk away a lot more inspired watching a movie like this instead of like a big Hollywood blockbuster. So with that in mind, I decided to try and swallow my ill feelings toward the sky dwellers above and gave this movie a shot. The pros for this movie start with the costume and set design. As I mentioned before, this takes place in the 1950s, so it is a period piece. And they did a good job of transporting us, the audience, to this time period, from the way that everyone dressed, the technology that they're using. Even this small town, it just looked like a simpler time, and they did a good job of replicating all of that. You could tell that it was a very meticulous and thought-inducing process, and when it was done on a very, very low-budget film, I mean, you can't help but cough up respect for that. So props to the props. This movie also had some fantastic camera work in general. They did a good job of utilizing a lot of minor activity in the foreground while the focal activity is back here, and it just gave a lot of shots, a lot of fantastic depth. They also utilized a lot of oneers, which if you know me at this point, I love oneers when they are used in movies, and one in particular in this movie was very, very interesting. It basically just had a camera just zooming around this small town and like going in and out of buildings, in and out of like windows that are on like the second story of a building. Like, it was impressive. I would genuinely love to see a behind the scenes of how this sequence and scene was shot. I mean, Chris Stuckman mentioned that they stuck a camera on a go-kart and had the kid just go wild around the town, but that doesn't explain how they went in and out of buildings like from different stories and everything. So I don't know, there's just some camera wizardry at work here, and it looked good. And per usual, when you have a lot of long takes and oneers, you also have a lot of fantastic performances, which this movie had. None of these actors during these long takes were able to get bailed out by a cut. They just had to keep going and tackle long pages probably worth of script, and you gotta respect an actor that can handle all that. However, unfortunately, this movie was not all sunshine and rainbows, which does bring me right to the first con, and that was the lighting. This movie had some very poorly lit sequences, some of which you had actors and actresses' faces completely shrouded in darkness. You can get away with having poor lighting on any other part of the human anatomy while you're filming it, but you cannot get away with it with a poorly lit face. The face has to be illuminated. Yeah, that might be a matter of preference, but I can't really argue that. There's just nothing interesting about watching someone talk and there's a big shadow just draped across their face where you can't even see any of their facial expressions as they're talking or delivering the lines. I mean, they may as well be wearing a mask at that point. Speaking of the importance of seeing people's faces, while I do applaud a lot of the long oneers that are used in this movie, there are a good handful of them that have large portions in which it is taken place from behind the two people talking to each other. Like, we're just seeing the backs of their shoulders and heads. This does not take away from the fact that these are very intricate shots to execute and plan and coordinate and everything, and you can get away with this in a small dose, I think, but I think this movie really pushed the limit on what's acceptable. It's large durations of dialogue in which two people are talking to each other for a long period of time, but you don't see their faces through hardly any of it. And going back to the importance of seeing facial expressions while delivering lines, I mean, it's a lot more important than people give it credit for. Now, a couple other gripes that I had with this film were referring to two specific sections in which stories are being told. Long durations of dialogue, basically monologues, one of which is someone speaking on camera to a group of people, and the other one is being told over the radio. Both of these sequences take up a good amount of the runtime, and neither of them did I feel like really landed as good as they could have. For the one that we have our speaker on camera, it's basically a long, almost feels like 10-minute sequence in which you have a woman telling a story to a group of people, and all the shot is just one static shot outside of like a really subtle push-in, but it's just one woman just speaking the entire time with like zero cutaways for reaction shots. Don't get me wrong, respect to the actress who did this part, because she was not bailed again by any cuts or anything. She just relayed this whole story just right out there all in one take, so props to her. But outside of that, it was a very boring shot. I'm probably just as shocked as you are that I'm actually condemning the use of a oneer, something that I usually praise, but this one didn't feel like, you know, that theater act that I usually love out of oneers, where you have a lot of camera movements, a lot of actor movements and extras and going in and out of different rooms and everything, lighting changes. I mean, that requires a lot of coordination and preparation, whereas this one, outside of this woman speaking and giving a damn good performance, there's really nothing else to this shot, and it just gets stale. On the flip side, during the other long story that was done over the radio, that one does have some visual variance, but not of the variety that I would have loved to have seen. Honestly, I'm not really sure what I was seeing throughout most of it while this man was telling this story. There was a lot of strange imagery, which was maybe creative decisions, but there were some points where it literally just looked like it just went to like a black screen, like there was nothing in the video track during that portion. It's these long drawn out portions that just made this movie feel a lot longer than it actually was. The plot was very meandering and boring and just a slow, uneventful burn that it was honestly just tough to get through. All in all though, I think that this movie is really all about context. Perhaps some of these gripes that I had were kind of low budget workarounds to try and make something happen with limited resources, which I can fully relate to and respect. I think if I watched this movie in like a film festival setting, I'd probably appreciate it a little bit more than I did. I'd be a little bit more forgiving. But while I'm watching it as a movie that I review, I don't review on a curve, so I can't rightfully give this movie much higher of a grade when I'm putting it next to movies with much greater production value caliber. It sucks and it doesn't feel great, but that's just the way it is. I'm going to give The Vast of Night a C. I can't deny the possibility that maybe if I was a little bit more intrigued by aliens, I could have been a little bit more lenient, so maybe if you're into aliens, maybe you'll like it more. I can't say here or there. But I will say that I do give respect to the team that made this movie. They made something out of nothing. And I would love to see what this team would be capable of achieving if they were given slightly deeper pockets. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel to stay up to date on new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe and thanks for checking in.